Hi everybody, this is Ron Taylor with the Roughcut overview. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 14. Looking at verses 1 through 5, we could say the hidden speech or the speech we don't understand is for us in our personal times. The revealed or the understood speech that we have, those utterances, are for the body of Christ. Okay, verses 6 through 12. Message to another believer, it must be understood. We cannot speak in other tongues to another believer without interpretation and expect that to be the proper function of the body. It's about who you're speaking to. I love when Paul says, you know, if I'm talking in other tongues, I'll say 10,000 words. But he says, if I'm talking to you, I'd rather say 5 words in a language you understand than 10,000 words in a language you don't understand. He also said, you know, I thank God I speak in tongues more than you all. And the Greek there is not more than you all in addition, it's more than you all in multiplied. Paul was absolutely a tongue talker, and he had 2/3 of the New Testament came out of this man. He had a great amount of revelation of grace, great amount of revelation of the body of Christ, and great amount of revelation in the functions of these gifts. You give a message to a corporate body. In that instance, you pray for the interpretation. That's the thing to do that would be in right order. Pray for the interpretation to come, if not through you, through another believer. I like verses 12 through 17. He says these are legitimate gifts. Speaking in tongues is a legitimate gift, and he uses the example of praying over a meal in other tongues. He says, you give thanks well, but the guy next to you is not edified because he has no idea what you just said. Okay, so he says he's giving it legitimacy. He's saying it's real, it's right, but it's not being used properly. It's kind of like when you get a new product and you're trying to assemble it. Maybe you quit looking at the directions for a little while, and those instructions said to put part A to part D, and you put part A to part C, and it's like, well, these are all right parts. They're just out of order, aren't they? Well, thank God we're getting things in order. When it's not an understood language, you have to recognize that and keep it to yourself and to God, like he said, and ask the Lord for interpretation of those words. Again, it is so important. It is such a point of clarification for me. Who are you speaking to? If I'm looking at someone and I call their name and I start to speak to them, like I've had this experience before, and I'm trying to talk to them in English and other tongues is coming out, I know that interpretation is near because I'm not even trying to speak to this person in other tongues. I'm trying to talk to them in English and other tongues is coming out. So the interpretation comes right behind that, and it turns out to be very edifying and helpful for them and sometimes both of us. But if I'm looking at them and I'm talking to them in English, it's clear. It's absolutely clear what I'm being said. So that's the key. They have to know what you're saying so they can come into agreement with it. It's not like we can stand up there and go off in other tongues and say, now you all go home and get the interpretation. Thank you for coming out today. That's not exactly how that works. But look at verse 18 and consider that the mature operation of the church is to move into a clear, unarguable position where the body is being edified. He uses the example of his, you know, if an unbeliever walks in and you're all speaking in tongues all at the same time, he'll say, well, they're crazy. But if you walk in and everybody's prophesying to each other, and then when he comes into that atmosphere, prophecy manifests and begins to function over his life, he said he'll fall on his knees and declare that God is in you of a truth. So when these things function properly, their purpose becomes clear, and that purpose is edifying the body of Christ at large, and then it's undeniable at that point. And then he has a correction in here I wanted to point out. I'm going to say it like this. Don't pretend you invented any of these gifts or operations, and stay teachable. My goodness, that is so important. Stay teachable. There's Proverbs about that, isn't there? You all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.